Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this match, I had a very crazy strategy idea that I wanted to go out and execute, and it actually worked. It's a strategy that a lot of people will probably look at on paper and say, no way, why would you do that? That looks like a noob strategy. There's no reason you would ever want to do that. But particularly, this strategy involves targeting a Shadow Priest. It involves coordinating your interrupts on Vampiric Touch and spamming the heck out of Dispel to remove the Vampiric Touches as they go up. My team was able to execute this in a way that this Shadow Priest actually almost did less damage than I did at the end of the game playing a healer. And it made the game a lot easier. Although it does come with some risks. I'm just going to run you through it because I thought it was a really cool and awesome strategy, and you may want to take it for yourself as well into your own gameplay. I would say that this is a strategy that is good to execute on if you're playing a melee cleave, so Ret Warrior, Enhancement Shaman Warrior, Feral Druid, Hunter, something with a lot of interrupts and likely physical damage dealers or melee range damage dealers. And if you're playing a Disciplined Priest, the strategy probably works even better if you're Holy Paladin, with the ability to dispel multiple magical effects from multiple targets. But I was playing with only one dispel, so you can do this as any healer. And in this strategy, it's very effective against Boomkin Shadow Priest because I'm removing the Boomkin's damage over time effects, as well as the Shadow Priests. So it stops the Shadow Priest from doing damage. It also stops the Shadow Priest from recovering health. And I time my dispels around the Devouring Plague of the Shadow Priest. So at the start of the fight, I was playing more of a standard strategy, right? Stay at the pillar, keep dots up, try and maximize your damage. And then I was kind of thinking, you know what? If I stay next to my team will be able to help me with crowd control. If I stay too far away, they won't, which is another advantage of this strategy in this matchup. I use my medallion during the celestial alignment of the Moonkin. We can see that active here on the frame, lasting 15 seconds. If you see that as a healer, you should use some of your most powerful cooldowns. As I was crowd controlled, you can see the pressure from it is really starting to mount on my team, particularly my warrior. This is going to be the scariest moment in the game. This is where you need to trade defensive cooldowns, utilize crowd control. So I use Intimidating Shout, I use Rapture, and we're able to recover. And once that celestial alignment is down, then you can start focusing more on the Tunnel the Shadow Priest strategy. I utilized Mind Games here to try and prevent the Paladin from healing the Shadow Priest during Divine Favor, which gives me time to then purge it off. And I'm playing pretty aggressively onto the Paladin. I'm still kind of playing more of a neutral game. I hadn't fully dedicated to this Dispel Spam aggro strategy. I was still contemplating whether or not it would work. Here I thought this Cyclone was casted on me, so I used Pain Suppression, anticipating it on my warrior to stop damage during the crowd control. I then use Mass Dispel to remove Cyclone, and this was my first sign to start thinking about, hey, I can just dispel all of these dots, and if I dispel all of these dots, we're not going to take any damage. And that's when I started getting a little bit more aggressive onto the Shadow Priest and just maximizing as much damage as I could. Here I'm still using Dispel to remove crowd control, such as Entangling Roots. The strategy can backfire if the Shadow Priest is able to land a Mind Games in between all of your Dispels. But here you can see the Warrior has Devouring Plague, although it's kind of hard to see with the text on it. So I dispel Devouring Plague and I dispel the rest of the dots. I tell my team when I'm doing this, so that if they have an interrupt, they need to try and line their interrupt up, because I'll be horrified after dispelling a Vampiric Touch. I won't be able to stop any incoming damage. I won't be able to assist with any sorts of cyclones. And then this is where I was started to feel like, hey, the strategy of just standing right on top of the Shadow Priest actually feels pretty good. My team has a lot of utility. So when I run into midfield, I'm going to eat a lot of crowd control. But because I'm next to my teammates, they can still disrupt things and help me out. And the crowd control isn't necessarily going to be long enough for the other team to actually net a kill, so long as I stay ahead of dispelling the dots. Here I can land a Psychic Scream onto both damage dealers and just start maximizing my pressure. And I'm still looking at the frames here to see if there is a Devouring Plague. And if there is a Devouring Plague, I want to dispel that. Devouring Plague is basically all the burst damage of the Shadow Priest outside of Mind Games, and it's going to be what heals the Shadow Priest for a lot. So if you really want to put the pressure onto a Shadow Priest, make sure you're actively removing Devouring Plague, which is this purple icon right here. I use a Mass Dispel to remove all of the damage over time effects across my team, and I'm still playing really hyper aggressive, basically standing right on top of the Shadow Priest to maximize my damage and so that my team can interrupt the Boomkin when necessary. The Boomkin could likely punish me more for this, honestly. I could move to the left here and stand next to the Paladin. It would probably be a better position, but still my main goal is to just be dispelling the Devouring Plagues as much as possible, and then asking my team to help coordinate interrupts, storm bolts, and wind shears. And you can see that my team is taking effectively no damage whatsoever during these times, which means the only time we need to be worried is when I'm crowd controlled or when they're using offensive cooldowns. But look at the pressure that's mounting already from this. The Paladin is suddenly at half mana, playing really aggressive and dispelling all these damage over time effects. The Shadow Priest is freaking out at 40% health as a result of just standing in this weird position that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why am I just standing in the middle of the map? They could punish me for this, but because they're so reliant on damage over time effects that I'm just consistently removing, they still can't generate pressure despite me playing in this position, which actually ends up being a better position to be in overall. But these are the situations that are scary if I'm crowd controlled, such as Cyclone. So using a defensive cooldown, the Astral Shift is going to negate the damage while I'm unable to heal. Also, by stacking up, I'm going to get cleaved with some dots, which can break crowd control. That moving into the future, like my Root Solar Beam right there broke 2 damage over time effects from the Balance Druid, who can't really control cleaving Moonfire and Sunfire onto me. So it does increase the chance to break out. But you can see, look at the mana on the Paladin, already down to 30%. I'm a Disc Priest. I'm beating this Paladin heavily on mana at this point. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this strategy if you weren't running with some type of hybrid, so an enhancement of Feral or a Ret Paladin, because they need to help you heal. And this is where it can backfire. The Shadow Priest got a Mind Games off while my Dispel was still on cooldown. Likely, if I were to iterate on this strategy again moving into the future, I would play double Dispel as a Discipline Priest. But I just, for the purposes of this video, I show you that it works with single Dispel, so almost any healer can do this. If you're a Druid, it's probably unnecessary to stand right here on top of the Shadow Priest because you're not going to be doing as much damage, and you can just heal with more instant casts. But as a Discipline Priest, it's a bit harder to constantly move around. So by just standing in the middle, you don't need to move nearly as much if the Shadow Priest goes from one side to the other side of the map. And I'm still just looking at the damage over time effects. I see there's only Sunfire, and look at how low the damage is. There's basically nothing happening to our team. Normally these Shadow Priest compositions can just completely overwhelm you. So I was trying to come up with a strategy, and I'd run out of mana, and it would be very difficult to actually deal with. So I came up with this idea to just run on top of them and see how it works. And you can see so far, the only time we've really been afraid is when I've gotten crowd controlled, and when I have, we've always had a cooldown. So if it ever got to a position where we didn't have any cooldowns, then we should probably start thinking about running away, such as right here. I'm in a Cyclone. They're targeting my Shaman, who doesn't have a way to get out of crowd control, doesn't have a good defensive cooldown. So this is going to be a very scary moment in the game. And I'm basically just mashing Dispel as much as possible to get all of the dots off. As soon as all the dots are off, he's suddenly back to full health. Suddenly there's not really a lot happening. The Shadow Priest damage is going to be minimal. The self-healing is going to be minimal. And look at the Paladin, 10% mana at this point, which is insane because as playing these types of matchups in the past, I would normally be out of mana trying to drink, mostly drinking my own tears from running out of mana so quickly. But with this strategy, it's actually the enemy healers that are running out of mana. Now here comes the Celestial Alignment. We don't have a medallion for a couple more seconds here, so this is going to be a very scary moment in the game. I tell my Shaman to use their medallion and start running, get away from it. This Celestial Alignment, this is Barkskin right here, but the blue icon, Celestial Alignment, this 3-minute icon on my Omnibar, this is basically the only time you're going to die against a Balanced Druid. Or at least it's going to be really fast that you do die, that you won't really have time to react to. So it is better to just over-respond, use everything that you've got, break out and survive. And then as soon as that thing is gone, get back onto the Shadow Priest. I see Mind Games being casted, so I know they're thinking about it. And I would like to save my Dispel for that Mind Game, so I'm not mashing my Dispel at this point in the game. We're just trying to still just finish the Shadow Priest, right? The Paladin has 0 mana. Just keep maxing out all of our damage. Here we fear the Paladin to prevent any healing. They use Divine Shield, but the Shadow Priest is still quite overwhelmed. I fear the Balanced Druid, and then here I need to Dispel Hammer of Justice. I actually get stunned 1 second before being able to, but I can still use Pain Suppression when I'm stunned, which is going to just totally stop the damage. onto my shaman, and this shadow priest is basically just not having a good day at the office. This is going to be a really tough strategy for them to deal with. In particular, if you're having troubles with the shadow priest, you're just going to run them over, and then you're going to see at the end of the game on the scoreboard how seriously effective that strategy was. Maybe I could speed up and skip to it. I don't remember if this team surrendered at any point, but this strategy was, interestingly enough, very fun to play too, because normally against these Shadow Priest teams, you're kind of just withering in the back, kind of almost waiting for your own demise. But when you're playing like super aggressive, trying to fear the Boomkin, you can see here I almost did more than half of the Shadow Priest's damage. It really hindered their ability to get anything going. And as long as my team dealt with the Boomkin by me either using Psychic Scream on the Boomkin or using defensive cooldowns during the Shadow Priest partner's burst damage, we could remove their threat and remove the Shadow Priest threat and run the healer out of mana faster, all by playing super reckless and kind of aggressive and throwing caution to the wind and just making sure to time our dispels around that Devouring Plague or around the mind games. And it was very effective, super fun. And this is a strategy that I'm going to implement many more times in the future. And if you'd like to see it live, you can follow me on twitch.tv/Supatease. I'm doing my best to stream every day there. So if you'd like to watch live gameplay or some kind of entertaining rap gameplay, that's going to be the place to be. If you liked this type of video and this type of content, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as I do news updates and tier lists and PvP guides. And I'm looking to get both TBC and Shadowlands content running simultaneously. If I'm doing one, it does not mean that I have abandoned the other. I have a lot of time that I throw into WoW, and I can guarantee that both games are going to be represented because I'm having a lot of fun on both of them. So if you're interested in this type of content, then definitely consider subscribing to the channel. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.